Good morning, everybody. My name is John Kamin, and this is Eric Hunter. We're from the law offices of Bradford and Barthel. I'm the director of the firm's editorial board, and Eric is a global futurist who heads up the Innovation Futures division within the firm. We are here today to discuss how growing law firms can navigate turbulent times. So with that, let me ask you, Eric, what are some of the big tech issues you see facing law firms today?
It's interesting, John. We're in a period, obviously coming out of the pandemic, where there's so much uncertainty. There's thoughts of, are we entering into recession, or how far away is recession? Are we in one right now? What's the Fed going to do next? And as these questions come in directly into play as far as investment goes, when firm leadership takes a look and saying, where are we going to be going in the months and years ahead, how do you then end up strategizing what you're going to do over the next 3, 6, 9 months as far as the project goes? And then how do you prioritize what's going to happen 3, 5, 7, 10 years down the line? Because both are really important. So I think when taking a look at investment and technology and looking ahead, these are things that I think a lot of law firm leadership, they're really looking at and struggling now. And I think that's across the case with, or across the board with professional services in general.
And so when you're talking about investment, I know people tend to think about big law firms in general, but also should smaller firms be taking a look at investment and planning out their technological future?
Absolutely, definitely. And I think oftentimes it's interesting enough that sometimes smaller to mid-sized firms can end up leading that charge, in that they have to have a smaller technological footprint. They can't afford to have the type of investment that some of these other larger firms have been able to do. So then smaller to mid-sized firms have to be very choosy about their partnerships. I'm talking about the technology partnerships. Who are they going to work with that's going to end up evolving with them, where they don't have to have a whole lot of spend, knowing that the research and development that's going to be going on with these technology partners, they're going to be handling the billions of dollars and millions of dollars in these specialized teams, and making sure that machine learning is moving forward, the AI within the machine learning is moving forward, that as we're taking a look at mentioning machine learning and artificial intelligence, for example, two terms that I think for some people, are they buzzwords? Are they real? What's real? What's happening? The answer to both is that it's very real, it's moving forward, and the change is incremental. And so therefore, if you're going to be working with these technology partners, how do you find the right ones to make sure that you're moving along with that type of industry itself? And that's something I think small to mid-sized firms are very well positioned to do, have had to do during the pandemic, and then moving forward, it's only going to become more important.
So when we are taking a look at some of those big risky issues that cause turbulence in the economic markets, what do firms need to keep in mind as they balance, on one hand, as you said, the need to innovate and keep on moving forward, and then on the other hand, when things are really tough, to just sit on that nest egg and kind of hoard your resources for the future when you are ready to make that bigger move a year or two from now?
It's a great question, and it really touches on an interesting quandary that a number of firms have found themselves in over the last couple of years, where there actually has been a lot of investment, and therefore, as far as in the firm practice itself, firms have done well, and so they have the opportunity to invest going forward. So there is a lot of availability for investment right now, but it's a question of when. Are we doing it right now? Do we need to wait? I mean, as far as what's the economy going to do? And so I think the main thing in that kind of position for firms to think about, irregardless of the broader macro pictures, facing our business and what's happening with our clients right now in the interim, how can we then best serve what they're doing now and where we think things are going to go 3, 6, 9, 12 months, just from a technological evolution standpoint. The macro picture has been so impactful the last couple of years. I mean, obviously with the pandemic, supply chains, these kinds of things, they really impact our business, impact our client set, impact the way we work. There was a time that the topic of let's change how we work was a bit abstract. It was more top of mind. It was really talked about when you're looking at 2016, 17, 18, 19, into early 2020. But then all of a sudden, concept had to become reality really fast. And the interesting thing is that what I think firms noticed is that that didn't mean there had to be this huge dollar spend to make it happen. It didn't have to be a huge dollar spend in technology or this concept of, are we falling behind when we're hearing things about robotic automation, machine learning, artificial intelligence? Let's throw money at it. Or gosh, we wish we had money to throw at it. Instead, what I think a lot of firms have found is that a lot of these concepts, it's common in the technologies that people, individuals use every day. And we were all in the pandemic together, so to speak, during lockdown. And during that, we became a little bit more reliant on technology in some ways. And in other ways, it helped augment different approaches to business we wouldn't have normally approached before. So we had, in essence, had a template over the last decade that set in motion a path that businesses could take forward and run with. The thing that I would encourage firms to think about is that the last 2 years isn't necessarily past as prologue for the future either. I think that right now there can be a tendency on firms to become a little bit over-reliant on tech to deliver their means because of the immediate cost-benefit analysis they've made over the last couple of years. Whereas as we're growing and moving into a new medium, there still is very much that face-to-face, the essence that takes place when individuals meet, when our attorneys meet with clients and vice versa. There's a balance that has to take place from the last couple of years to moving ahead. And I think it's that sweet spot, so to speak, that's going to be the big key for firms to be successful, to think about when they're looking at where do we invest, how do we invest over the next 5 to 10 years.
And so when I think about investment in technology, one example that comes to mind is I was talking to firm partner Don Barthel around 2010, back when I was a journalist. And back then I was doing an article on law firms adopting new technology. And back then the new edgy thing that it seemed like half of the law industry was still hesitant to go to was cloud computing. And Don, of course, had mentioned that B&B was embracing that because as far as the firm's data, if there was a fire in one warehouse, we wouldn't lose all our data if our data happened to be stored in that one warehouse because we had it on the cloud. So what are you mentioned AI earlier, what are a few technologies today that you could give an example of that firms may want to be looking at in the future here in 2022?
It's a great question. And to start with Don and then project forward as far as that perspective of cloud, what was really interesting about that time was looking at cloud as a delivery model for collaboration. So these concepts of machine learning, AI, the bet at that time was, let's look at leveraging the cloud, but not just the cloud. Let's work with a technology partner that is very heavily invested in developing everything behind the scenes within cloud, which to make collaborative cloud work meant AI, machine learning. Again, the same type of technologies behind the ones that we use every day, whether it's our social media tools or Google search, whatever it might be. The idea was to partner with that and then project forward. And so that type of evolution is still happening. And even though we may not have seen it as much in business released software over the last couple of years, it's something that, as we're talking right now, right, we're using this two-dimensional interface. We both have screens. The individuals are going to be watching this. It's going to be a two-dimensional interface. But where the technology is really moving right now would be to make this something that's much more immersive, something where you have much more of a sensory input, right? Or let's say that you're an attorney, you're presenting evidence at trial, and you really want to be able to have the actual evidence presented in a different way. Currently, we still have these two-dimensional exhibits, whether it's physical or this. But when you're bringing in technologies like augmented reality, virtual reality, things that seemed sci-fi or super specific or nothing to do with our line of business, all it takes is our experience of the pandemic, us knowing the limitations that we have with what we're using right now with this visual medium. Then you can actually see what would it be like to present trial evidence when I can actually have my presentation done in a completely immersive experience rather than having photographs. What if the photographs are taken with the right kind of capture to present that kind of immersive experience where you can essentially walk through the exhibits you're trying to give? You bring in the other kind of senses, whether it's smell, sound, etc. These become part of trial evidence that we can bring in when you start introducing these immersive technologies like augmented virtual reality. Just because Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook mentions Meta, that doesn't mean that we necessarily should be like, oh God, all right, because he's talking about it, give me a break. Nothing we're ever gonna have to worry about. The concept behind it is really sound because it is just a natural evolution of what we're trying to do right now. Being able to have glasses that can capture and present, or let's say, for example, individuals listening to this like, God, this guy Eric talked on and on and on. There was only like a couple things I was really interested in, would be able to then extrapolate those couple verbs, verbiages, etc., and be able to have cross-reference notes, images, replay, these kinds of things. So these are all elements that I think that are really important for firms not to take for granted. It's the perception-based technologies and the technologies that allow us to essentially be able to leverage the remote experience we're doing now, while at the same time try to make it a bit more immersive. And it kind of brings in that balance, if that makes sense.
Interesting. And so as firms are looking to invest in different technologies in the future, should they be, and does it make more sense to have a block of short-term strategies, but then also make sure that that block fits in your longer-term strategies and budgeting as well?
Absolutely. Short-term strategy would be that incremental change. What can we do to, one, in essence, continue delivering high value to our clients, enhance that ability. At the same time, how can we then realize profitability, our business, incremental steps, whether we're augmenting what we're currently doing, allowing it to improve, and that's the short-term element, right? The long-term is an eye on that disruption. It's kind of like the newspaper industry back in the 90s, right? Where you end up having the specter of the web, but newspapers, for whatever reason, they're focusing on their bottom line. They weren't seeing this disruption happening until it caught a lot of newspapers too late. Looking back on it, it seems ridiculous. Like, hey, it was the web. How could they not see it? They didn't see it. And so I think the longer term technology strategy is something very similar, where you end up having the things I was talking about, it's a bit more disruptive. But if you think about, look, I want to have the incremental change short term, that makes a lot of sense. But long term, the way our attorneys work, there's a potential for more disruption, where again, rather than using a screen to be doing the work, to be billing and doing all of the different activities, there's going to be able to, the option to parse through the work with our hands, with that virtual, with that perception element, right? These are all disruptive elements that take place. That type of robotic automation that takes place behind the scenes, it changes the way the business of law is done. The key thing that I try to keep in mind, though, is it doesn't change the law itself. It doesn't change the need for the attorneys practicing the law or that value to our clients. Oftentimes, it's the business aspect of it that's impacted, and then how can we then best prepare to deliver that line of business within this reality of disruption? And those are the things I think that firm leadership think about and try to have to think about over the next 3, 5, 10 years.
Well, thank you, Eric. That's very interesting. And as we wrap up here at the end here, I did want to point out that Eric here and also our CIO, Amir Riabi, helped quarterback a complete redesign of our own website, which you can, of course, check out at bradfordbarthel.com. That was no small doing, Eric, and thank you for your hard work on that.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you so much to our client relations team and to you for all the work that you put into the website. It's really what made it possible, and really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today and our vision with Innovation Futures and what we try to end up bringing as far as vision within professional services and firms both in the US and around the globe.
Well, thank you. And isn't it true that you're speaking at a conference in London in a few weeks, right?
Yeah, at the British Legal Technology Forum, I'm going to be speaking on a coming decade in connectivity 2030. The idea being a lot of the things that I've been talking about today, you have to have the infrastructure to get there, the network to get there. So it's how do you end up leveraging that behind the scenes supercomputing, behind that cloud of information to drive the AI machine learning to bring us to the 2030 vision, where a lot of these different perception-based technologies come towards a reality within the business community.
Wow, and 2030, well, it sounds so far away. It's actually just around the corner, isn't it?
It's amazing how that works. You think of how much things have changed from 10 years ago to today. It's about projecting that element forward. It's interesting. Some things really remain the same, but it's incredible how some things just fundamentally are never the same.
Well, Eric, where can people find you on the internet?
I'm on LinkedIn. Find me there. If you just put in Google Eric Hunter Futurist, my bio, articles, talks that I've done, TED Talk, Future of Human Behavior, they're all out there. Easiest way to find me, yeah, just go ahead and put in Google Eric Hunter Futurist, and anything that you'll need will end up coming up that's relevant for what you're looking for.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time today, Eric, and thank you to our audience for tuning in. Don't forget to check out our redesigned website at bradfordbarthel.com, which also includes our blog on workers' compensation defense issues and strategy. And for Bradford and Barthel, I'm John Kamin. This is Eric Hunter, and we are signing off. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.